We break the chocolate. We break the chocolate. We break the chocolate. We break the chocolate. Greetings and welcome to The Rose Bush. My name is Rose and this is the channel where growth happens one thorn at a time. And if you can tell, I'm eating me some chocolate and we're gonna watch a video from LADbible TV. I really love that channel. They have great content and I'm about to watch this video of a gentleman telling his story about how he spent 34 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit, which is not shocking. Let's go ahead and get into it. And if you are new here, please, I would love for you to stick around, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you're notified whenever I upload. Promise you'll love it. So let's watch this.
I come home and my wife's car's not there. It's like 11:30 at night. No lights are on in the house, and we always left the light on if I'm out. And walked in. I have a man stretched out on my floor. I checked him, and he was dead. And I could see he was dead. Under no way that I could see was I not going to jail. I was born in Onken on the Isle of Man, 1954. A few weeks after I was baptized, my mother left me on my grandmother's doorstep, and she left never to return to the Isle. My grandparents made plans with the church on the Isle, the Catholic Church, to have me sent away. I was sent away to Ottawa, Canada in August of 54 to a place called St. Joseph's Orphan Asylum.
Good. Can we just talk about that trauma that whether this individual has trauma related to the fact that he was abandoned at an early age by his caregiver and then abandoned yet again by the new caregivers? I mean, that does a lot to a person. And I'm really looking forward to his story and to see how he is doing, how he's doing.
Ran by the Grey Nuns of the Cross, which I always tell people sounds warm and fuzzy, I'm sure. But I was only there about 6 or 8 months. It turned out that the girl who took me to Canada that had worked for my grandmother, a gal named Martha Virginia Boswell, who was one of the Boswell gypsies that used to come to the Isle of Man. She saw that my future there might not be good. She took me illegally and took me into the U.S. Eventually, we ended up going down these seaborne communities and landing in Phoenix, Arizona. And my mother had given her her passport to tell me in case I ever wanted to find her. It was like a cookie crumb. But she had taken my mom's picture out, put her picture in, so she used my mother's name. So I was raised under my birth name. I believed she was my birth mother. I called her mom. She was the one that had told me all about my being from the Isle of Man. And funny enough, all throughout my life, all I could think about was getting back home at some point. Unfortunately, due to bad relationships and the problem that she had drinking issues, she got real sick. And because of some of the people she worked with, well-to-do, one particular family called the Wetmores, they had adopted a boy and a girl. And they had plans to move because Dr. Wetmore had just gotten his degree and he was going to be teaching at a university. And something happened to the boy. And the boy was 12 years old. Even though I was 14, I was small because of malnutrition. I could actually fit into a 12-year-old's clothes and stuff. So he told her he would give me a good life and adopt me and stuff like that. And he said that he paid her to take my custody. And I was given that child's identity, his name, his date of birth, his social security number, all the things that you need to be a person.
Yeah. Where do you think they get all that information from? They either steal living people's children's identities or they're dead. And you have a dead person's identities, which is way more likely. But then again, criminals be out there.
person. And nobody knows what happened to that child. Even the U.S. government had looked and could not find any evidence of that child after I took his identity.
There you go.
So, yeah, but Dr. Wetmore was unique in his own ways. Him and I, he used to try to beat me or things, and that's kind of believed to what may have happened to the other child. He may have done it, and the other boy may not have survived. The biggest difference between me and him was because I grew up with this idea that I was something special through Martha, because one of the things she'd always told me to remember was I was a man of the isle, son of the sea, and a brother of the storm, and I could weather anything because the storm around me is my brother, so I could weather anything. One particular incident, and it was really the last time he did a beating, was that he beat me with a belt while he had me hold a tree out in the back, and he beat me on my legs and my lower back and stuff, and I wouldn't shed a tear for him. And when he was done, I turned and said, "Is that the best you got?" And he backed away and went inside and stared at me. He was used to breaking men in his way of business and stuff. So he was having a problem with this child that could stand up to him, and no matter what, I wasn't afraid of him, and that was something that scared him more than anything else. I signed up for the United States Navy. I had a lot of friends going in the Marine Corps at the time because I was still rather small. I didn't think I could make be a Marine. I didn't think I was big enough. Yeah, but the other side of the coin, I didn't want to hurt people, so I decided to enlist as a Navy corpsman, which is a medical corps.
How was your state of mind after that? Did you see anything that particularly affected you or stuck with you?
Well, just the fact that if anybody really thinks about the Vietnam era, vets that were in that time, Vietnam was not a popular, politically popular engagement. Most people wouldn't even say they were Vietnam vets. They went to hide. Some hid in the streets as homeless and drunks and drug addicts. Some went into the woods. Some went to Canada. Some went down to the jungles of South America because you just couldn't fit in places like that. I hid in the world of motorcycles. I preferred to be around motorcycles and people because I learned with people, if you say one wrong thing, the relationship can be ruined forever. Yeah, so
essentially he'd rather form relationships with inanimate objects. That way he doesn't have to open up or get close or be vulnerable. That way he doesn't set himself up to be disappointed. And it's relatable. It's relatable. It's a self-defense mechanism. It's a way to protect yourself, and that it makes sense. I mean, I already understand that why.
My personal relationships with people were never very good. So in Halloween 1977, my first wife, had abandoned me and my son when he was 9 months old.
Again, abandoned by another woman in his life that he cared for. God. It's got Edgar Allan Poe energy all over, except without the illness part.
I had my son until 1978. And then my first wife, she had decided, her parents decided we should get divorced and she should get my son, even though she didn't want my son. She didn't want to be a mom. Dr. Wetmore had contacted me and said, "Look, I want your son. I'll give him the proper life that you didn't want. I'll raise him to be a doctor or a lawyer," but I wouldn't do it. In a fit of anger, he threw an envelope at me, and it had my mom's passport, and it had my baptism certificate for the Isle of Man. And told me, "You're not an American. You're not my son. Get out of here. I never want to see you again." And then he switched sides, and he made sure my ex got my son. I met the other girl, my second wife, through friends of mine.
What a real winner. What a guy.
She was related to. And I started getting my life back together. We had a son, and I thought maybe it's time for me to go back to the Isle. Now I've got proof that I'm from there. So I was going to get a passport to go back and try to find my family. I didn't know if my family is alive or dead, or who was there or whatever. But I felt this calling that I need to go back. And I told my wife this is what I want to do, and she kept saying, "No, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a good idea." And I told her, look, it's not like I'm moving over there. I'm just going to go over for a trip. And I was going to go by myself because I didn't want her to come with me in case everything went terribly wrong, you know. And anyway.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it did.
Come to find out years later that she had actually been telling Dr. Wetmore things I was doing. And Dr. Wetmore realized that if I did go get a passport, he would be likely in trouble because they would ask where I'd come from. I don't have a birth certificate. I'm using this other kid's name, but at this time I was starting to take back my birth name once I had the passport. So he realized he might be in problem. At which point in time, he set in play a number of other situations that came about that would eventually lead me to prison.
1983, obviously there was a day that probably changed the course of your life forever.
Actually, it was December of 82. I had met a girl named Jackie who had been Martha's youngest daughter, and I thought my half-sister because I thought Martha was my mom. And her uncle, her dad's brother who has been caring for her, a guy named Stanley John Kearns, and then she had a son named Danny. And they were living in LA, and they wanted to move up to be around me. So I helped them move up. In the 6 months they were there from December till June, it was just terribly, terribly wrong. John and I got into one argument after another. He used to come down to my bike shop and try telling me and my crew how to do things. A few times he was drunk and he pulled knives. I'd get an altercation with him. I used to put him in chokeholds to make him subdued and stuff. And though police had gotten called because neither of us pressed charges and they weren't there when the crimes were happening, neither of us got arrested. But it was in the history, the police reports. So there was a history of this.
So now they're building
So
a
in
file.
June of 83, I was out of town. He got into an altercation with Jackie and started choking her son. And my wife and Jackie at that time took both of them to pull his hands off the boy. And then the following day or so, he was driving the car and he started punching Jackie, and she stopped the car and ran into the Marjorie Mason Women's Center. I come back, I'm found, he's arrested. I tell my wife, under no circumstances he'd come to the house. You know, we've got a young son. I don't want you to have to put up with him. You know, I said, if he does get out of jail, whatever, don't let him in. It was about a month later. I come home and my wife's car's not there. It's like 11:30 at night. No lights are on in the house, and we always left the light on if I'm out. And walked in. I have a man stretched out on my floor. And like I said, having been a corpsman, having been a medical corps, I checked him, and he was dead. And I could see he was dead. Yet there were no wounds.
That you could see.
A lot of people said, oh, why didn't you call the police? And my response has always been, here's a man I have a history of fighting with. I'm a biker, and at that time I was with a motorcycle club, so I was a patch holder.
Okay.
Under no
You're already
way that
I have limited experience with. I used to work with someone that and he explained, not that he's part of that group, but that just explaining the ways of the motorcycle groups. And yeah, like you're not really trying to draw attention to yourself because you kind of already do have attention on you because of that fact. But still, man, call somebody if you see a body. I know it may look bad, but don't touch. Don't go near. Just call. You can call anonymously.
way that I could see was I not going to jail. My first thought was I have to secure my home. I have to get him away from my home no matter what else I do. I didn't call anybody.
Move the body.
I just went and got a sleeping bag, put him in the sleeping bag, and was putting him in the back of my truck when my wife suddenly drove up. And it's probably about maybe 12:30 now or so. And My wife jumps out of the car and says, yeah, he came over. I gave him dinner, and then I gave him his asthma capsules that I've had. And I said, you weren't supposed to let him in. Oh, but he was agitated, and I didn't want him to do anything. The baby's here. And she said that after he collapsed, she got frightened and she went to a friend's house. And she's been there, and then she finally figured she'd come home in case I was home. And she knew I would be able to figure out what to do. And we start driving. I have no idea where I'm going. I don't really know what I'm going to do.
Please enjoy the sound of my lovely garage door opening. It's incredible. Oops. All right.
How much longer you got?
And we're back. Let's go.
I'm going to do. I just have to get him away from the house. But then for the next 4.5 hours, she's harping on me about, you're stupid. You didn't bring a shovel. What are you going to do with the body? Are you going to bury it? Are you going to burn it? What are you going to do?
How is this his
dump
fault?
It? What are you going to do?
First of all, how is this his fault? How is this even his responsibility? Homegirl was like, here, take these asthma capsules I've had. How old were they? Were they even asthma medication? Did homegirl poison him?
What are you going to do? For 4.5 hours as I'm trying to drive and trying to think. I've got this harping in my ear. And next thing I know, I see false dawn starting. And we were driving down a rural road where a lot of farm workers would be coming to work soon. And I just pulled over and I took his body out and I set him up against a post right off the road where he'd be easily found. Because again, it wasn't one of these things where I was trying to hide the body. I just wanted it away from my house. It couldn't be found at my house. And then...
But bro, what part of that is not a crime? Like you... It doesn't matter. Like, you look guilty. You look like you done murdered this guy.
And this will be always one of the things people will say, one of the stupidest things I did. And I'm not going to disagree. Figuring he just got out of jail, I didn't figure he would have identifications and stuff with him. So I took out a piece of paper and pencil and I wrote, in case of emergency, call. And I put my name and phone number and I stuck it in his wallet.
Oh
and I left
God.
it. And we drove away. So it was about 3 days later.
Look, had he done murked this guy, had he done whacked him, he's just be like, hey, I did it. It's like... I just can't. Okay, all right. Okay, let's do this.
Days later, and the police called and said they'd found his body. And they asked me, when was the last time you saw Stanley alive? And I told them about a month ago, maybe, at least a few weeks to a month. And so everything seemed to be okay, except for the moment that they also had contacted Jackie because she had been the victim and the reason he was in jail, and told him that he found dead. She immediately grabbed some of his checks because he'd lived at her place and got with my wife, and they went down and they cashed checks on his bank account to get back what she said was money he had taken from her welfare, or what they would call the dole over here.
She went and got her restitution.
This is 3 days after he's been found dead. And of course the banks have been notified and they're going in there with checks signed by him. It was just about 30 days from the time they'd found the body that they came and arrested my wife and Jackie. And I found out that they'd been arrested. The initial...
I just want to say that I was not expecting this story to go this way. Like, it just... I mean, I'm a crime junkie for sure. Literally. I listen to Crime Junkie. I listen to Park Predators. I listen to Counterclock. I listen to all Audio Chuck. I listen to everything, okay? Up Advantage, everything. So I was expecting the story to be wild, but I really wasn't expecting it to be, like, dumb. Like, just really dumb circumstances. I thought, for some whatever reason, I don't know, I thought maybe it was going to be a really violent murder. But then again, my brain always goes to violence.
The initial coroner's report had come back for death by strangulation. And though there was no evidence, the fact that the history was there that I had choked him out, and because I was, physically capable of being able to do that, it immediately turned to the fact they thought I did it, but they had no evidence. They went to Jackie and told her she was facing 18 years for forged checks. When they told her she was going to face possibly 18 years, she said, let me tell you what happened. And they went, tell us what? And he said, well, I want immunity, da-da-da. And the DA said,
listen, do you know how hard it is to actually get immunity?
said, okay. And said, well, here's what really happened. Sandy, his wife, poisoned the man. And then he helped her get rid of the body. And when they said poison, they went, what do you mean? He was strangled. They said, no, he was poisoned. They went back, did the coroner's inquest thing again. And sure enough, potassium cyanide had been what had killed him. Typical. They now charge my wife with murder one, with 2 counts of special circumstances. Each one carries the death penalty. One for the poisoning and one for monetary gain. Because apparently Jackie had given her a little bit of money on the side too. They stopped even bothering with me, except that every couple of weeks they keep changing my charges around. Accessory, conspiracy, all this stuff. Lying to the police, which was their favorite one. They tried my wife in December. Jackie was their primary witness. The jury came back 11-1 to convict my wife on murder one with special circumstances. But they didn't have a complete jury. So they had a hung jury. So the DA came to me and said, look, we lost this by this much. So we're going to do it again, and I'm going to make sure that we don't have any moral, problems on the jury. Unless you want to take this deal I'm going to offer you. I'm going to offer you a one-time and one-time only deal. And my attorney was sitting there. My wife's attorney was sitting there, and DA was
okay. That doesn't make sense. He's basically like, listen, he's like, the prosecutor's like, yo, we're going to do this again, and we're going to get it right. But you got to take this deal. It's like, nah, man, you can't try. You can't try again with the wife. You can't try again. You can't. The jury was hung. You can't try again unless you want to add some things. You want to add some charges. You can't just do that. But for this guy, so I feel like he got baited into a plea deal for garbage. Like, how do you get 34 years? I just don't understand that.
He was sitting there, and he said, we feel you're responsible for whatever happens there. So here's the deal. We'll offer you a 13-year prison sentence.
Where is your evidence? It's all circumstantial.
Now you have 10 minutes to make a decision. Think about this. Are you going to be able to tell your son that you allowed his mom to be put to death because you would not step up for her? Oh, by the way, you got 5 minutes left. Wow. Who do you think could do better time in prison? You, veteran, biker, or your wife who's just a housewife and a mom? Oh, and I'll sweeten the deal. I will never personally oppose any parole for you. And her attorney said, this is the best we can get. So I took it. I would do 13 years, so my wife would be released from all of her charges and given to my son. My wife got released 2 weeks after I took the deal. And because she'd been in the county jail for like 6 months with these other girls, one of them introduced her to her brother. And a few weeks after she got out, she was gone. Took my son and left the state with this other guy. The way the sentence had been is I was getting 13 years if I stayed out of trouble, worked, good time, all that. But what started the downfall on that was about 3 years after I went in, the California legislature changed the law and took all the good time and work time away from life term inmates. Well, now I can't do half time because now they just took it all the way. So now I'm looking at 27 to life. I did half my life and 2/3 of my adult life in prison. You could have 3 stabbings
In the next
during your yard time
episode,
before they'd finally close the yards and make you go back to your cells. Because they would just shut the yard. They'd put everybody on the ground, come out, pick up the body, take the body away, and resume yard. But after the 3rd time, they go, that's enough. Okay, everybody go back to your cells. Playtime's over. And he goes, don't you know who I am? I'm Charles Manson. I'm more famous than Jesus Christ.
oh hell yeah! I gotta
like,
find the second episode.
went
Where
to
is
court.
it? Let's go. Okay. Okay, so that was epic. So thank you so much for sticking around and watching that with me. We still don't know. I still don't know why he spent 34 years. But if he met Charlie, it's about to be wild. So stick around for the next episode. I'm about to do it right now. See you in the next one.